So obviously, Korean startup ecosystem, startup scene is booming. It's very hot. There are so many new startups popping up every day. Many young people dreaming about starting their own company instead of entering big companies like the Samsung, LG and Hyundai these days. And I actually worked as a IT journalist and businessman in Korean IT industry about 2 decades. But I never seen something like this for developed recent 2 years. So this is the snapshot of Korean startup ecosystem. There are investors, accelerators and networking, lot of events and media and government and things like that. And there are so many components there. And there you will see there are so many government bodies, and government portion is huge here. And you maybe wonder why that is. And that's because South Korean President Park Geun-hye made creative economy initiative as her administration's key strategy right now. So, at the heart of her initiative is a focus on the innovation and entrepreneurship. So she believes that the country's current economic model has reached its limit. So to boost growth and employment, South Korea needs to foster an ecosystem to support the startup. So startup has to be the engine of the creative economy. So we are not able to rely on Samsung forever. That's the idea. So one of the strong kind of example of the how Korean government is helping Korean startup right now is the TIPS program. TIPS is the ambitious government funding program for startups. It stands for Tech Incubator Program for Startups. It launched by the government agency. So it works like this. When incubators or accelerators have a partnership with government, when they make an investment for about 100,000 investment for the startup, government actually matches back about $500,000 US dollars as an R&D support fund. So it's about the 1 to 5 match. So and startup, they don't have to pay back all the money they received from the government. They are able to pay it back after when they are able to generate the kind of revenue as a license fee for up to 10% of their investment fund money. So sometimes government put more money as a marketing expenses and things like that. So it's possible when VCs put about 100,000 and government matches about up to 900,000. So which means that they're able to get about almost $1 million for that. So now, and about more than 40 Korean startups actually receive that fund from the government. And that's the reason why there are so many accelerators and new incubators and popping up in Korean startup scene right now. And these are the new accelerators actually made for recent several years. And one other interesting things happening in Korea is right now, for about 1 and 2 years ago, there wasn't that much some place to meet for Korean startup people right now. And as you may heard, Gangnam Style, right? And Gangnam is the kind of heart of Seoul and most popular place in Seoul right now. And Taeheran Road is the biggest boulevard in Gangnam area. And interestingly, recent 1 and 2 years, the places for Korean startup people is actually open here. So Maru 180 is by Hyundai Foundation, and D-Camp is by the Bank Foundation. And these places, the entire building is for startup. They provide office and event venues and coffee place and things like that. And my organization, Startup Alliance, opened the event hall early this year. And interestingly, Google to open Campus Seoul early next year. So this Campus Seoul is Google's initiative for this, provide a space for Korean entrepreneurs. So it's Google's first startup campus in Asia, following London and Tel Aviv. And there are ample supply of free or affordable office space for the startup in Korea. And as you know, in San Francisco, you have to pay at least 500 or up to 800 per desk for working, for a month. But in Korea, there are many, good places to work, and sometimes you don't have to pay the money, and sometimes you have to pay just a minimal kind of fee for, using this kind of, spaces. And there are many, networking events and hackathon and startup competition these days, something like this, organized by the, James, like here. So it's booming. So definitely, Korea is aiming to become the startup hub of the Asia right now. So I was able to see kind of, several promising signs in Korea right now. So the first influx of the talents to startup from elite school, elite engineering school like the KAIST and the Seoul National University, they want to go to the startups right now. And from consulting industry like the big companies like the McKinsey, Bain Capital, and Bain and Company, the young people working for these kind of consulting companies, and they want to move, and many people actually move to the startup management right now. Second, startups are getting investment from overseas places. For example, social commerce startup Coupang raised 100 million over 1 billion valuation. They became the unicorn. And third, Korean startups are getting acquired by the foreign companies right now. For example, 5Rocks, mobile user analytics startup, acquired by the Tapjoy, the San Francisco startup, last month. So that being said, I definitely able to say that the virtuous circle in Korean startup ecosystem just begins. So we are hoping that we are able to catch up Silicon Valley someday in the future. So that was my observations about Korean startup ecosystem. So I like to then let's hear more about from these distinguished panels who moves to Korean startup forward. So let me first begin with the peer. Yoon is a general partner of the Big Basin Capital. He founded Big Basin Capital in 2013, last year, to invest in early stage startups in Korea and the US. Previously, he was the investment director at Burgeoning International, a global VC headquartered in Silicon Valley, where he led the firm's investment in the Sunday Toast. Prior to Walden, he was with Intel Capital in Santa Clara, and earlier than that, he was the software developer at startup. So Pierre, you have invested in Sunday Toast, the very successful Korean gaming company, and their company, Anypang, is kind of national game in Korea right now. And they went public last year. So can you tell us more about your story about investment, why you invested, and how it grew so quickly?
Thanks, Jung, for such a long intro of my background. Hi, I'm Yoon. I'm just a VC. My career is not that colorful, but thanks anyway. I just wanted to share my investment story related to Sunday Toast. It's a mobile gaming company in Korea. It's a company that I invested in back in 2010. So the Korean market, I know for a lot of U.S. investors, it may be sort of like a foreign market that you may not be familiar with. So I'm based here. I mean, I go to Korea a lot. So as a foreign investor, I just want to share my story of my investment. The one company in Korea, then why I invested and how it was successful and how it grew and everything. So it was back in 2010 when I was with my previous employer, Walden, and so we sometimes make investments in Korea, and we decided to make one investment in the social gaming company in Korea. So if you remember, the one of the hottest company in Silicon Valley back then in 2010, if anybody remembers, it was Zynga. So it was the hottest company in Silicon Valley back then. And obviously Korea is very strong traditionally in the gaming space. So we thought that social gaming would be sort of a good bet in the Korean market. So we actively looked for a potential investment target back then. So we reached out to maybe like top 10, 15 companies in social gaming space in Korea. So I reached out to them personally and then had a meeting with a bunch of them. So after that, we decided to invest in this very early stage social gaming company called Sunday Talks. So we invested back around November in 2010, and then the company has been sort of struggling, not doing very well. First year and a half. So the company then released. The company was initially doing the PC-based social game, and then later on they moved on to a mobile platform, and then partnered with KakaoTalk, and then they released this super successful game called Anypong. And then the company took off in 2012, and then went public last year. So that was a kind of short story. And so the company was struggling a little bit after our investment for about a year and a half, and then they moved to mobile platform, and that's when they really became successful and made money, and then went public. So I just wanted to share a couple of lessons that I learned through that investment and after watching how the company grows. So one thing that I observed and learned is that if something happens in Korea, it happens really fast. So it was just amazing to watch how the Anypong game become household name in Korea essentially. It was about the same time as Gangnam Style, if you remember back in 2012. So the biggest hit back in 2012, I would say Gangnam Style and Anypong. So just to give you some perspective of how successful this game was. They only launched in Korea, so outside Korea, not many people know. The download number was about 24 million, and the daily user at the peak was about 12 million. So, and compare that number against the total population of Korea, which is about 48 million. So you're talking 1/4 of the entire population is playing this game on a daily basis. Not the gaming population, but the entire population. So you can kind of guess the scale and how viral this game became. So, and it happened in a matter of, I would say, maybe 2 months, 2-3 months, no more than that. So when something happens and it becomes a hit, it just penetrates, it goes viral really fast. So it was amazing. And I think one of the reasons that it was possible is that Seoul is about half of the Korean population is either in Seoul or in the vicinity of Seoul. So it's a very concentrated area, and everybody talks to everybody. Is a friend with everybody. So it's a really kind of great market for something to happen really quickly, and it was amazing.
Yes, I remember about 2 years ago, everybody just kind of talking about Gangnam Style and the games Anypong, and when it comes to accepting the new trend, Korean people was really fast. That's why Korea has probably the highest penetration of the smartphone. So, James, You are one of the most well-known Korean startup supporters and power networker in Korea. You created the beLAUNCH, the largest startup festival in Korea, and you have run it for 3 times. And I think that you probably well observed what happened in the last several years, and you probably have some kind of your own observation. So can you share with that?
Yeah, thank you for your kind introductions. And what I feel is that, let me explain about myself. Is that beSUCCESS is a kind of a startup media like TechCrunch. So we write about the tech and startup articles, and we also open a conference. The basic reason that we do like that is to help the entrepreneurs to go global side in a very efficient way through media and community. So the reason why we first beLAUNCH was that trying to build up community. That even though the entrepreneurs doesn't go overseas, we can build up some community that the overseas investors or partners can come here and find opportunity to do the business together. So first of all, I think that the growth of the beLAUNCH go along with the maturity of the startup ecosystem in Korea. About 3 years ago, when we first said that we're going to open a beLAUNCH, so frankly, few people believe in this. Because we try to say that we're going to gather more than 1,000 and pay a conference, and we're going to do a startup better ones. But people say that you are not the government guy and you have no money. How can you build up these kind of things? So first time was very tough, but as time goes on, I think it's to come along with the trust of the startup ecosystem. So first beLAUNCH was sponsored by the Amazon Web Service in Singapore, and from that beginning, Microsoft and Google and Naver and Dom, a lot of government. So it comes all along with that gaining trust for 3 years. So I can feel that now the number of the growth is that first year was 3 years ago about 1,300, and last year was 1,700 attendees, and this year in May was 2,500 attendees come to beLAUNCH in Seoul. And the percentage of the attendees from overseas was first year was just 5%, but now it's around 20%. So what we want to build up is that to try to build up community, to gain some presence from the overseas. So through this, we can see that the Korean startups can be gaining some presence and possibilities from around the Asia. So that's the first thing that I learned. Another thing that I learned is about some kind of reputations. Frankly, when you trust somebody, it's really tough to trust somebody Korean entrepreneurs, whether we need to invest in this company or whether we can it's valuable to meet these entrepreneurs or a startup. But I still a strong support from government and a beLAUNCH and a lot of medias. So they're Korean entrepreneurs, even though they don't really try really too hard to gain reputations, they can gain easily the trust from overseas investors. So the success case is that what you mentioned, 5 Rocks was acquired by TechJoy. The first beginning of the 5 Rocks acquisition was the beginning from beLAUNCH last year. The 5 Rocks founder was meet the investor from Japan called Global Brain. They just meet these 2 people meet in beGLOBAL's VIP rooms. And after that, just 2 months, they got invested about 2 million. And then the startup goes up, and then 8 or 10 months later, they are acquired by TechJoy. So what we see is that we try to build a reputation in Asian field, and they keep accumulating the experience around the Asia and Korea. So it will keep influence the other entrepreneurs, keep youngsters and teenagers, and this will be go along with the growth of the beLAUNCH and beGLOBAL. So this is what I feel for 3 years.
Mm-hmm. So you are able to see that the Korean startup scene is more vibrant than 3 years ago, 2 years ago, and you started seeing more application for your startup battle and things like that. You are able to see kind of uptick trend.
Yep. So first thing is first year is very interesting, real ads and the a social network like Facebook or Twitter and dating ads. Mostly about 3 years, but this year is very varied, just diverse. So first thing that I'm really interested about the health field is very like a booming. And second thing is education. And third thing is e-commerce is very strong, but very like a local e-commerce, but have our own some business model. So these are kind of like three things that I'm really interested about like looking into. And they try to like build up, so we try to like build up our own some startup like industry, not just following up this Silicon Valley or other overseas. So this is what I'm seeing and very satisfied about the opening application of beLAUNCH.
Thanks for the comment. And I really believe that you contribute a lot to the Korean startup community.
Oh, thanks to you.
So let's move to the Dino. Dino is a co-founder and the CEO of the Memebox, a beauty e-commerce company from Korea. And prior to co-founding Memebox, Dino was the B2B sales manager at Ticket Monster, a Seoul-based daily deals platform. Before that, he worked as a PR associate at Tom Ford. And Dino is the graduate of the Parsons School of Design. So, Dino, your company, Memebox, is the first company accepted by the Y Combinators program from Korea. So everybody's talking about that. That was a kind of big, some kind of the topics in Korean startup ecosystem. So, can you explain how you got in? Just
we were part of Winter 2014 batch. And we went through the same steps as every other YC companies. 10-minute interview by the partners. And then on the same day, I got a call from Paul Graham that he wants to make an investment. So, I was at a coffee shop with my CTO. We thought about it. I called my current investors at the time. And then they were like, go for it. So, I called Paul back and then said yes.
That's it?
Yeah, it's,
the secret sauce? Too simple.
Yeah, the interview was pretty interesting because we're the only, we're the only guys with pink boxes in our hands and cosmetics, where everyone else was bringing something like really, really cool and really technology forward. But there was a big
How loud is your voice?
You have to speak up.
Dino, would you like to stand up and...
Yeah.
So Dino, I heard that support from the Korean government program. So can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, our initial funding for our global expansion was done through the ministry. We won one of the battles that ministry held in 2013. I think $10,000 was the prize, and four of our, yeah. So
Please sit down now.
Okay, that's much better. Yeah. Anyway, the prize was $10,000. So we were just thinking, what should we do with this money? And we were looking for something that could really help us in the long run, and that was just to make a trip to San Francisco, not knowing what we could do. So four of us came. We stayed in a really, really bad hotel, but we went to malls. We just knew no one in the valley, but we just made a decision that we have to be here. So I was left behind by myself, and all of my partners and my employees went back to Korea. So I really thank Korean government or the ministry for affording that trip. And to share the status of our company, we ship to 51 countries now. We have 3 offices. Our headquarters is here in San Francisco. We have an office in Korea. We have an office in Shanghai. And U.S. and China is now has become the two big pillars for our company, where Korea is really supporting the tech infrastructure and the logistics infrastructure of the company.
So Dino, can you explain a little bit more about your company? Because I think that your company Memebox is probably one of the good, prime examples why Korean startup has a, competitive edge in the global market. So, and how you guys actually, growing recently, and what's your kind of achievement in the U.S. market recently, and.
Yeah, I mean, we made a lot of pivots along the way, but I think during YC, we made our biggest pivot where we moved into a full stack model. We're launching our own cosmetic brand with our influencers in the 4th quarter of this year, and we've been preparing that for the last 3 quarters. Where in 2013 we were just a traditional e-commerce that would have a business model that work with the commissions from the brands. So just coming to the U.S. was something that really broadened our mind and opened our mind to be we really have to be at a scale of $1 billion. How are we going to achieve that? And it wasn't something that was achievable with the business model that we had at the time. So maybe next year, beGLOBAL, I can share what the results are going to be like.
Looking forward to it. So Pierre, you have been invested many companies, many early stage startup, Korean startup for recent 7 months. And how many? About 5 or 6? Right.
Since I started Big Basin Capital, 5 companies.
5 companies, and you probably observed what's happening in Korean market right now. Can you really share about that?
Yeah, sure. I think not many U.S. or the Western people know that Korea has a very sizable company, a sizable market, even for startups. So I just to give you a little bit of perspective, I just prepared just 2 slides. Can you show the slides? Or can you click it? Oh, there we go. Okay. So this is kind of interesting chart that I want to share with you. So this is this 1st quarter 2014 top revenue country rankings in the Google Play Store. So I intentionally hid the countries. So I just wanted to ask you, what's your guess for Korea among top 5? It is within top 5. So. You guys are too smart. Okay, so yeah, please. Yeah, so as you can see, it's Japan, United States, and South Korea, and so forth. So, so South Korea actually used to be number 2 up until end of 2013, and then U.S. now overtook the 2nd position. So, I mean, I actually personally find this is a sort of mind-boggling chart. South Korea is, in terms of population and GDP, much smaller, compared to the U.S. And even Japan. And then I have another chart that I'll show with you. So I just, to give you some perspective that the Korean, local market is quite sizable. So this is the number of downloads of all the Google Play apps. As you can see, the South Korea is number 4, and US is at the top. And interestingly, Japan is not here, but their gross revenue is number 1. So think about the average revenue per user in Japan. But I just wanted to show you to scale the population. I just did a Google search last night and just put the numbers there. And as you can see, Korea is by far the smallest company within top 5 in terms of population. but it is ranked quite high in the number of downloads and also the total revenue. So I'm just gonna give you some ideas that the local Korea market is not so small. It is very big. And my previous portfolio company, Sunday Toss, that I talked to you about, they became a $500 million company just launching their game in Korea market only. Yeah. So from 0 to $500 million company in a matter of like 3 years, just Korea market. So I mean, they have expansion plan to go China and Japan and global, but just killing the Korean market only, they became a $500 million company. And we have other examples in Korea that became way bigger than $1 billion companies. So.
Thanks, Phil. So the time is up for our panel discussion. So as we discussed, and there are so many interesting things happening Korean startup ecosystem, and there are more interesting Korean startup is coming. So we brought the 10 very promising Korean startup for this event. So please stay tuned and keep watching Korean startup ecosystem. Thank you.